We had a couple of students that looked at paper making and not only went and found a very small scale kind of someone working out of their back shed and really looked at the process from a really nuts and bolts point of view, but also managed to get in with like a large scale paper recyclist, and so they saw the larger end of the commercial and then the sort of smaller end of the manufacture. The 3-week intensive, the 7 weeks, and the 2 weeks of folio at the end. For the course, we had a 7-week project. So each individual student chose 7 processes that they would study, but pairing them up in a group of 3 other students, so they got exposed to a wider range of processes. In addition to that, to sort of share as a class and make sure that we were getting a good saturation of different processes, I got the students to, in pairs, present one process themselves back to the class. We had processes that were quite future focused in terms of quite cutting edge 3D printing technology and injection molding, blow molding, and a lot of the high volume manufacture processes. And then we also got a few sort of traditional processes like glass blowing or paper making that are still mass manufacturable today. We asked each student to do at least 2 plastic processes, at least 2 metal processes, and at least 2 sort of miscellaneous or other processes. And we asked the group to come together and just make sure that there was no overlap. If a student chose to do forging and aluminium extrusion, then none of the other 3 students would pick those processes. We went to metal spinner, which Sumitra organised, and we took all 60 students all at once. And that was essentially a choice made because it's quite a visual process where you can understand how the process works very much from seeing it happen. There's no things that happen inside. And the second class visit that we did was to a makerspace, introduce students to other making opportunities out there in the community. And also a makerspace touches on a lot of processes, but also has them in an accessible way in the sense that a lot of the people using the makerspace are developing a project rather than coming in with clean orders of X units. I actually did the sort of pitch to the students about self-assessment and why it was important at the start of the first week. The bit about self-assessment that I think is really beneficial for students is it makes it really clear right from the start of the process what they're being assessed on and how that's going to take place. For the first project, we introduced it like with the criteria that we'd produced that just said, this is what you're going to get assessed on, and we asked them to set goals right at the start of the project about where they thought they would achieve, and then revisit it in the next week to see how they were tracking. And then for the final assessment, they were essentially evaluating how they performed against where they expected. For the second project, we asked the students to actually write the criteria. So we ran a little bit of a workshop where they essentially got together in small groups and talked about what would be an outstanding result, what would be an average result, what would be a fail, and be quite specific about that in terms of what we were trying to achieve for the project. If, say, for instance, we asked students to go out and engage with manufacturers, if they did not go and meet any manufacturers, that would be a fail for that criteria. Whereas if they went over and above the required 3, then that would be an outstanding result. So it kind of fell together quite nicely in terms of them saying, oh, I understand how the criteria explained on this piece of paper directly results to what I will need to do to achieve that. There were a few students that really took certain aspects and ran with them. So some of the students really took on a few processes that they really liked and engaged and went off on their own bat to sort of really go out there and meet those people. We also saw students who really took on the idea of exploring what processes are out there. So we had a curated library of videos about materials and processes, and also the book resource of Chris Lefteri's Making It. And essentially, some of those students looked past, I just have to read this section for the quiz, and really engaged with the book. Some of the students really engaged with the videos. We had a student who worked his way all the way through 200 plus videos in our curated library and went out beyond that and followed his nose through YouTube about a whole bunch of further processes. My name's Sandi Paulson. I'm a designer working here in Melbourne. Bit of a history. Sort of studied in Wellington, New Zealand, worked for a university there, and then studied and worked my master's in Seattle, and I've been in Melbourne for about 4 years. Background in product design plus everything I've got my hands on, basically. Having taught first year a bit, the start of the course was very much along the lines of my previous experience with first years. Driven a lot by students' independent interests. So instead of feeding the students the materials and processes that we thought were most relevant, allowing the students to pick their own processes that they were going to study. Cool.